The moon hung low and heavy over the Bay of Naples, its silvery light dancing on black waves. A warm breeze carried the brine of the Mediterranean and the distant laughter of late-night revelers along the promenade. Salvatore Luciano inhaled the salt-tinged air and slipped his suit jacket off, draping it gently over his pregnant wife's shoulders. Elena protested softly, but he insisted with a smile. In the soft glow of a street lamp, they looked like any young couple in love, sharing a tender moment by the waterfront. No one would guess he was one of the most powerful men in southern Italy. Elena cradled her round belly with one hand and held Salvatore's arm with the other. Her dark hair cascaded over the lapel of his jacket, and she gazed up at him with a contentment that made him feel, for once, like an ordinary husband. He cherished these moments of fragile peace. In a world as dangerous as his, such moments were painfully rare. They left the cozy trattoria where they'd dined privately after hours. It was past midnight, and the narrow cobblestone street was deserted. Their car awaited a block away, a black sedan idling under a flickering lamp. Bruno, Salvatore's driver and bodyguard, stood by the car door, a sturdy silhouette in the darkness. Bruno gave a small nod as they approached. All seemed quiet. Salvatore's senses were sharp from years of living under threat. As they walked arm in arm, his eyes subtly scanned the street's shadows, ever vigilant even on a night that was supposed to be a rare escape. Elena squeezed his arm. "Relax, Caro," she whispered, her voice low and affectionate. "We deserve one night without worry, don't we?" He managed a grin, leaning to kiss her temple. "Just being careful, amore. Almost there." The sky above was cloudless, the moon painting the cobbles in silver. Each footstep echoed softly. Somewhere in the distance, a Vespa engine revved and then faded. The city was alive, but here in this narrow lane it felt like they were alone in their own world. A sharp crack split the silence. In an instant, Salvatore tensed. The sound, distant but unmistakable, gunfire. Bruno's voice rang out in warning. "Signore, via!" "Sir, get down!" Tires screeched at the end of the street as two dark vehicles barreled in from around the corner. Headlights blazed, beams skittering over ancient stone walls. Salvatore instinctively pushed Elena behind him, shielding her with his body. Pop, 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 pop! Muzzle flashes flared from the lead car. Bullets whizzed past them. Stone chips exploded from a wall to Salvatore's right. One round shattered the restaurant's front window they had just left, spraying glass across the pavement. Bruno drew his pistol, returning fire with a bellow. One attacker cried out as Bruno's shot found flesh, but more gunfire erupted. Bruno staggered as two bullets struck his chest, his silhouette arching before crumpling by the sedan. Elena screamed, clutching Salvatore's arm. He grasped her, heart pounding, and pulled her down behind a parked scooter as cover. The assassins poured out of the vehicles, 6 or 7 figures, their faces obscured by darkness and scarves. They fanned out, guns up. Salvatore drew a sleek black handgun from a shoulder holster beneath his shirt. He had foregone a full security detail tonight for discretion, a mistake he now realized with dread. With Bruno down and no reinforcements, they were cornered. He whispered urgently into Elena's ear, voice tight but gentle. "Stay down. Whatever happens, don't move." His eyes were fierce, conveying a promise and a plea. Elena's breath hitched, fear widening her eyes. She clutched at his sleeve. "Salvo, please," he placed a trembling hand over hers on her belly for one precious second. "Ti amo, I love you. Both of you." Before she could protest, Salvatore rose from behind the scooter and fired twice in quick succession. Crack! Crack! One gunman toppled with a spray of blood. Another dived behind a car. Sparks flew as bullets struck the scooter and pavement around Salvatore. He ducked, barely avoiding a shot that whistled past his ear. From the ground, Elena watched in terror. Her husband, once just the playful boy she'd fallen in love with, now a ferocious protector, moved with deadly grace. He advanced toward the closest shooter, using parked cars for cover, determined to draw the attackers away from her. The assassins shouted orders to each other in harsh Italian. "Lì, dietro la macchina." "There, behind the car!" Their coordination was practiced, merciless. These were professionals, likely rival Camorra soldiers sent to eliminate Don Luciano, and they outnumbered him heavily. Salvatore pressed his back to a Fiat, trying to spot Elena out of the corner of his eye. She was still crouched where he left her, hands over her belly, tears glinting on her cheeks. He steeled himself. He could not let them reach her. One attacker crept along the far side of the street, trying to flank. Salvatore popped up and fired 2 more shots. The man yelped as a bullet caught his shoulder, spinning him down. A victory, but brief. A sudden impact like a hammer blow struck Salvatore's left side. He gasped, faltering. A bullet had punched through his ribs from behind. The burn of it stole his breath. He stumbled forward, dropping low as more shots peppered the car above him. Pain radiated, but he gritted his teeth. He had to keep fighting. "He's hit!" someone shouted. The voices were closing in. Salvatore crouched, his shirt already wet and warm with blood under his arm. He steadied his shaking pistol with both hands. In the periphery, he saw a shadow detach from the darkness. Behind the scooter, one of the gunmen, closing in on Elena's hiding spot. Rage obliterated the pain. Salvatore lunged from cover, ignoring the fiery protest in his side. He emptied his remaining bullets in a wild arc toward the man near. "Elena, 3 shots." Then click, the gun ran dry. But he'd done his job. The man fell, screaming as he clutched a shattered knee. Salvatore turned toward the remaining assailants, chest heaving. There were at least 4 still standing, emerging from cover now that his gun was empty. One, possibly the leader, stepped forward under the street lamp. He had a cruel smirk and leveled an automatic pistol at Salvatore. The light finally revealed the shooter's face, and Salvatore's stomach lurched. He recognized that face. It was Carlo, his closest friend and underboss. Carlo stared down the sights at him, eyes cold and lips curled in disdain. For a fraction of a second, Salvatore's world stopped. Betrayal. Carlo was behind this. "Carlo," Salvatore breathed in disbelief, voice barely audible. Carlo answered with a slow shake of his head. Almost pitying, then said softly, "I'm sorry, amico. It's just business." His finger tightened on the trigger. Elena saw it happen in nightmare clarity. Carlo and the others opened fire on her husband all at once. A thunderous volley of bullets lit the night. Salvatore jerked and twisted as the impacts riddled his body. 1, 2, 5, blood sprayed into the air. Another round hit and another. 14 shots in total tore into him. Each one a small eruption of red mist under the lamp's glow. "No!" Elena screamed, her soul shattering as Salvatore was flung back against the car by the sheer force of the gunfire. His blood splattered across the cobblestones like dark paint. He collapsed to his knees, somehow still upright, staring down at his chest in shock. Crimson spread across his white dress shirt, blooming like roses. Adrenaline surging. Elena crawled out from her hiding spot despite his earlier plea. Tears blurred her vision. She reached him just as Salvatore crumpled onto the street on his back. His pistol lay empty by his hand. His breaths came in wet rasps. Elena pressed her hands to his chest in a futile attempt to staunch the bleeding from too many wounds. Warm blood flowed over her fingers and beneath her, pooling on the stones. "Salvo, stay with me," she sobbed, hovering over him. Her tears mingled with the blood on his cheeks. "Please, please," he coughed, a horrible gurgling sound as blood bubbled on his lips. With a trembling hand, Salvatore cupped Elena's cheek. His eyes, once fierce, were now dulling, agony and love flickering within. "Elena," he whispered, each word an effort. "You are... son, live for him." She shook her head frantically, golden brown eyes searching his. "We need you." Don't leave us," she choked out. She could barely form the words through her sobs. His hand fell weakly to her abdomen, smearing it with his blood. "Name him Luca," Salvatore gasped. A faint, bittersweet smile struggled to form. "My little Luca?" Elena's heart splintered. She grasped his hand and pressed it harder to her belly, as if that could tether his soul to life. "I will, I promise." "Just hold on!" In the distance came new sounds, sirens wailing through the labyrinth of streets. The attackers heard them too. Their feet scuffled as Carlo barked, "Andiamo!" "Go!" Engines revved, the vehicles peeled out, disappearing into the night with a screech of tires. Elena barely noticed, consumed by her dying husband in her arms. Salvatore shuddered, eyes glazing as shock stole over him. Still, he focused on her, summoning strength from some final reserve. "Protect Luca," he breathed. His bloody fingers tightened a fraction against her, then slackened. Elena felt a wail rip from her throat. No, Salvo." His body gave a single violent tremor. A final breath escaped his lips and his head lolled back. The light in Salvatore Luciano's eyes dimmed, then went out entirely. The Don of Palermo died there on a quiet Naples street, in a puddle of his own blood, protecting his wife and unborn child to his last breath. Elena shook, cradling his head against her chest. The metallic scent of blood and gunpowder hung thick in the air. Around her, bits of glass and bullet casings glittered in the moonlight. The sirens grew louder. Neighbors were starting to shout and peek from balconies at the carnage below. But in that moment, all Elena felt was emptiness, cavernous hole where half of her soul had been ripped away. She pressed her forehead to Salvatore's, tears drenching his face. "I love you," she whispered brokenly. Her hands moved to her belly as she made a silent vow. "Our son will live. I will keep him safe." Blue lights bathed the street as police cars and ambulances screeched to a halt. Voices swarmed. Paramedics rushing to Bruno and to her, officers shouting orders. Someone tried to pull her gently away from Salvatore's lifeless form. Elena fought against them with what little strength she had, a feral cry, escaping her lips as her fingers were pried from her husband's blood-soaked shirt. "Ma'am, you're hurt," a medic urged. Only then did Elena notice the warm ache in her own shoulder and side. A crimson stain spread on her dress. A stray bullet or shrapnel had grazed her, though she hardly felt it through the haze of grief. She allowed herself to be guided to a gurney, her body trembling violently, eyes never leaving Salvatore. They were covering him with a sheet. This couldn't be real. One moment they'd been dreaming of their future, naming their unborn child. The next he was gone. As they lifted her into the ambulance, Elena realized, through her shock, that at least one of the men responsible still lived in this world. Carlo, she had seen his face. The merciless eyes of the man Salvatore had trusted like a brother. He had orchestrated this nightmare. Elena's sorrow flared into hot, bitter rage, a scream in her mind. But as another contraction of pain tore through her belly, she could only clutch her womb and pray. For her child, for the strength to survive this horror. Revenge would have to wait. The ambulance doors closed, and amidst the swirl of lights and chaos, Elena was whisked away from the blood-stained street, leaving behind her husband's body and the life they once had, now shattered beyond repair. 24 years later, Rome, Italy. Morning light spilled over a tiny apartment's kitchen, painting the worn tiles in gold. Luca rubbed sleep from his eyes as he stood by the counter, waiting for the mocha pot to finish brewing espresso. Outside the open window, the sounds of Rome awakening drifted in. Distant Vespas, vendors calling out the day's fresh produce, children laughing on their way to school. It was a comforting chorus of normalcy, one that Luca Luciano had known all his life. Yet something in him felt restless today. Elena fussed at the stove, slicing bread for toast. She moved a bit slower these days. A streak of silver in her dark hair, but her hands were as steady and gentle as ever. Luca watched her quietly. She didn't notice his gaze. Her brow was furrowed, lost in thought as she absently buttered the bread. There was always a certain sadness in her eyes during early mornings. As if dawn reminded her of something painful, Luca often wondered if it was about the father he never knew. He cleared his throat softly. "Mamma, vuoi una mano? Mom, need a hand?" he asked, offering a small smile. Elena blinked, coming out of her reverie, and returned the smile warmly. "No, tesoro. I'm all right. You finish making the coffee." She reached up and smoothed an unruly lock of hair on his head, a habitual gesture. At 23 years old, Luca stood a head taller than her, a strong young man with Salvatore's dark hair and sharp eyes. Elena's entire world revolved around him, perhaps a bit too tightly, Luca sometimes felt. He poured 2 cups of espresso, the rich aroma filling the kitchen. Elena placed their simple breakfast on the table, toast with jam, a bowl of olives and cheese left over from last night's dinner. They sat together, mother and son, in a comfortable silence for a while. But Elena's gaze kept drifting to the small shrine on a shelf in the corner of the room. A framed photograph of a handsome man with proud eyes, Salvatore, and a silver crucifix beside it. A candle flickered below. Every morning she lit that candle. Luca had seen her do it 1,000 times, yet she rarely spoke of the man in the photo. Today he mustered the courage to ask a question that had lingered in him for years. "Mama," he began softly, "will you tell me about Papa? About how he died?" He'd asked before, in different ways. Her answers were always brief, evasive. It was an accident, or it was a long time ago. Luca. But now his tone was earnest, and he saw her flinch slightly, as if the question were a physical blow. Elena's hand trembled around her coffee cup. "Figlio mio, it's painful for me," she whispered. Her eyes glistened, fixed on the rising steam. "Your papa was a good man. That's what you need to know." It was the same answer she always gave. Luca's jaw tightened with frustration he tried to hide. He had long sensed there was more. Ghosts in his mother's silence. Nightmares that made her cry out some nights. He had grown up in the shadow of secrets. Before he could press further, Elena stood abruptly and began clearing the dishes. "Finish your coffee, Luca. We should get going. Before the market gets too crowded." Luca sighed and sipped the last of his espresso. He knew better than to push. Not yet, he told himself. Instead, he grabbed their shopping bag and followed her out into the sunlit streets of Rome. They lived in a quiet neighborhood on the city's outskirts, where buildings were low and draped with bougainvillea, and neighbors greeted each other by name. Elena had chosen this life. Simple, unremarkable, safe. She'd raised Luca away from any hint of his father's world. To him, she was a devoted single mother who worked as a seamstress from home, and his father had been a loving man tragically lost too soon. That was the narrative she gave him. And Luca had accepted it for years, swallowing the questions that gnawed at him. But lately, something inside him refused to stay quiet. Perhaps because he saw the fear that never quite left Elena's eyes, or because he felt a fire in his blood that he couldn't explain, a rage at injustice that flared when he saw it. He wondered if it came from the father he never met. At the open-air market in the piazza, life burst in vibrant color. Stalls overflowed with plump tomatoes, eggplants, fresh basil, and citrus. Vendors barked out prices in sing-song Roman dialect. Elena haggled cheerfully with the produce man for a good price on artichokes, and Luca found himself smiling at how animated she became here. This was her sanctuary, ordinary, alive, safe. While Elena chatted with a fishmonger about the best catch of the day, Luca wandered to a nearby stall of olives. He popped a marinated olive in his mouth, savoring the briny flavor. Just then, a sudden commotion disrupted the morning hum. "Al ladro, stop, thief!" an elderly woman cried. Luca turned to see a teenage boy sprinting away from a flower stall, clutching a purse in his hand. The stall owner, a gray-haired signora, stumbled after him feebly, one hand pressed to her chest. Without thinking, Luca bolted into action. Adrenaline spiked in his veins. He chased the thief through the throng of shoppers, dodging a toppled crate of lemons and weaving past startled onlookers. The boy was fast, but Luca's legs were longer and fueled by righteous anger. In a few heartbeats, Luca closed the distance. He lunged forward and tackled the thief to the ground. They hit the cobblestones hard. The boy yelped in surprise and pain as Luca wrenched the purse from his grasp. Panting, Luca hauled the scrawny teenager up by his collar. The kid squirmed, eyes wide with fear. He couldn't have been older than 16. Dirt smudged his face. For a moment, Luca saw not an enemy, but a desperate youth. Still, he held him firm. "Non ti vergogni?" Luca hissed. "Aren't you ashamed?" There was quiet fury in his voice. Around them, a few market patrons began to applaud or mutter approval. The elderly flower seller arrived, breathless. "Thank you, son," she said, voice shaking as Luca returned her purse. "Grazie al cielo," Luca nodded, releasing the boy into the grip of a stall owner who had come to help. The would-be thief looked more relieved to be caught than anything. Perhaps a hungry street kid in over his head. Luca felt a pang of pity even through his anger. Suddenly, Elena was there, tugging on Luca's arm with trembling hands. "Luca, Dio mio, are you all right?" Her face was ashen. She had seen him tackle the thief and her eyes were wild with panic. "I'm fine, Mama," Luca assured, giving her hand a squeeze. His heart was still pounding from the brief chase. No harm done. But Elena was not reassured. She turned to the small crowd that had gathered, politely declining their praises on her son's heroic act. Then she practically dragged Luca away, abandoning their half-filled shopping basket at the fish stall. "Che stai facendo?" Luca protested as she urged him around a corner, away from prying eyes. "What are you doing?" Elena rounded on him, her expression a storm of fear and anger. "What were you doing?" she scolded, voice low but intense. "He could have had a knife. You could have been hurt. Or worse," Luca frowned. "I was helping, Mama. That signora needed—" "I know," Elena interrupted, pressing a hand to her forehead. "I know your heart, figlio mio. But you can't put yourself in danger for a few euros and a purse. Promise me, Luca, you won't do something like that. Again." Her eyes brimmed with tears. She fought back. I can't lose you." The raw fear in her voice cut through. Luca's frustration. He suddenly realized she was shaking. This was more than a mother's worry over a scuffle at the market. This was old terror, Surfacing at the sight of her son in even minor peril, his anger softened to guilt. Gently, he set his hands on her shoulders. "I'm sorry, Mama. I didn't mean to scare you." He spoke softly, looking into her eyes. "But I can't just watch when something wrong is happening. It doesn't feel right." Elena closed her eyes, a tear escaping down her cheek. "Right and safe are not the same," she whispered. She pulled him into a fierce hug. Luca felt how tightly she clung, as if checking he was truly unharmed. Over her shoulder he stared into space, heart heavy with confusion. She was overreacting. Or was there something she wasn't telling him? They walked home in silence. Elena kept a protective arm around his as if he might vanish. The lively energy of earlier was gone. Both were lost in thought. Back at their apartment, Elena headed straight to her bedroom, saying she needed to lie down. Luca watched her shut the door, the click of the latch echoing in the quiet. He exhaled slowly. The incident had unnerved her profoundly, but why? Surely she knew he could handle a petty thief. He'd even taken some boxing classes at the local gym, against her wishes, and was far from helpless. Luca ran a hand through his hair, frustration simmering. He loved his mother dearly, but her overprotectiveness made him feel smothered at times. She acted as if danger lurked around every corner of their quiet life. He had learned to live within her boundaries. No out-of-town trips. Check-in phone calls if he was out after dark. Endless warnings to avoid any trouble. He tolerated it to keep her happy. Yet today, something about her reaction left a bitter taste. It was as if she'd been expecting danger, always waiting for disaster to strike. He glanced at the old photo of his father on the shelf. Salvatore's eyes, his eyes in many ways, stared back enigmatic. Luca stepped closer, drawn by a surge of longing. "Papa," he murmured under his breath. "What really happened to you?" As if in answer, a draft from the window flickered Salvatore's candle. Luca's gaze fell to something new beside the picture frame. A letter, yellowed with age, tucked partly under the frame's base. That hadn't been there this morning. He reached out and slid the paper free. It was folded twice, the edges soft from handling. On the outside, in Italian, were the words, "For my son, Luca." Luca's heart thumped. He immediately recognized the handwriting as not his mother's. It was bold, confident script. His hand shook as he unfolded the letter. "Elena?" he called, voice unsteady. No response. The bedroom door remained closed. Luca swallowed, eyes lowering to the letter's first line. "My dear son," it began. "If you are reading this, then I am gone." Luca sank onto the sofa, the letter trembling in his grasp. The words blurred for a moment as tears sprang to his eyes unbidden. It was from his father. It had to be. Salvatore Luciano's final message to the child he'd never met. Luca forced himself to read on, every word etching into his soul. "My dear son, I write this on a night I fear I may not return home. Your mother does not know of these words. They are my heart, poured out for you alone. I hope with all I am that you will never need to read this letter. But if fate is cruel and I am taken from you before we ever meet, then know that I loved you before you even opened your eyes. I have done terrible things in my life, things I once thought necessary. But loving your mother and you is the one pure good I carried. I'm sorry, Luca. Sorry that I will not be there to see your first steps, to teach you to ride a bike, to cheer your victories or comfort your pains. My choices have cast a long shadow over our family. I was born into a world of blood and loyalty. The life of a uomo d'onore. A man of honor, they call it. A life of crime and power, I call it truly. I wanted to keep you and your mother far from it. I tried to shield you both, but if I failed, please forgive me. Your mother is the bravest, most loving person I've known. Trust her. Listen to her. She will always have your best in her heart. By the time you read this, she will have sacrificed so much to keep you safe. Honor her, Luca. Protect her when I cannot. In my desk drawer there is a box with a ring, my family's ring. It belongs to you now. Do not wear it unless you must reveal who you are. I pray that day never comes. I pray you live free of the shadows that haunt my footsteps. But if you find yourself lost in seeking answers, you may speak to Francesco, my most loyal friend. He will tell you what you wish to know about me. His address in Palermo is on the back of this letter. Above all, remember, la familia è tutto. Family is everything. I gave my life to protect you. Live, my son. Live for what's right, and know that my love for you will outlast even death. With all my love and regret, Papa. By the time Luca finished, tears were freely streaming down his face. His chest felt tight, as if the grief he'd never fully processed finally burst forth. Papa. This was his father's voice, speaking across a chasm of time. He carefully turned the letter over. On the back, faint but legible, was an address in Palermo, Sicily, and the name Francesco Abate. A loyal friend? Luca's mind raced. Before he could think further, he heard a soft sob behind him. He looked up to see Elena standing in the hallway, one hand over her mouth and the other braced against the wall as if to hold herself up. She had realized what he was reading. Mama! Luca's voice was raw. 100 questions swirled, but the devastated look on her face froze them. Elena approached slowly, her eyes on the letter in his hands. I never wanted you to see that, she said, voice trembling. Shame and sorrow etched lines into her face. Not so soon. Maybe not ever. You were going to hide Papa's last words from me? Luca didn't mean it to come out accusatory, but it did. The hurt was too fresh, too sharp. Elena winced. She sank into the armchair across from him, hands twisting together. I saved that letter for years, she murmured. Locked away, hoping I'd never have to show it. I almost burned it so many times, but I couldn't. Tears welled in her eyes. After what happened today, I took it out. I was only rereading it. You weren't supposed to. I had a right to, Mama. Luca's voice cracked with emotion. He wiped his cheeks roughly. All my life you've kept everything about him a secret. Why? His hands clenched the letter involuntarily. He wrote that he was in a life of crime. A life of blood and loyalty. What does that mean? He said his friend Francesco could tell me what I wished to know. Luca's eyes bored into hers, searching. What happened to Papa, truly? No more lies. Elena flinched at the word lies. She closed her eyes, 2 tears escaping down her face. When she opened them, something in her resolve broke. Your father was a Mafia boss, Luca, she whispered, voice laden with decades of pain. He led a powerful family in Palermo. He did terrible things, as he wrote, but he wanted out. For us. She drew a shuddering breath. Before you were born, he tried to make peace with his rivals, to secure a safe future. But they ambushed us. Her face twisted at the memory she had fought to bury. It wasn't an accident, as I let you believe. It was an assassination. Luca's heart pounded like a drum in his ears. Mafia, assassination. The words felt surreal in their tidy living room. Yet fragments clicked into place. Her constant fear, their low-profile life, even his own inexplicable anger at injustice, blood and loyalty. His father had lived and died by the code of the Mafia. He realized he was breathing hard, fists balled on his knees. Who did it? He managed, barely recognizing his own voice. Elena looked away, staring at some invisible horror. A rival clan from Naples, she said after a long silence. They wanted to remove your father and expand their power. Their boss. His name was Conti, Alberto Conti. Her voice hardened, an edge of hate that Luca had never heard before. He arranged the attack. They gunned down your father in front of me. She stopped, unable to continue, covering her mouth as a sob threatened. Luca felt a coldness sweep over him. Conti. He silently mouthed the name, committing it to memory with deadly precision. His father's killer had a name. There's more, isn't there? Luca pressed gently. He sensed an unspoken truth still lingered. The letter, Papa mentioned someone betraying trust. About loyalty. Elena's eyes widened, and for a split second, Luca thought he saw fury flicker there, but she quickly shook her head. No, he was speaking generally. The Mafia is built on loyalty and betrayal. The words sounded rehearsed, evasive. In that moment, Luca sensed she was holding something back, but she had already told him so much, perhaps more than she'd intended. She suddenly looked so small and weary, shoulders hunched as if crushed by the weight of the past. When she spoke again, her tone was pleading. Luca, figlio mio, I know what you're thinking. She reached across and grabbed his hands tightly. But you must not go looking for them. These men, Conti and his kind, they are monsters. They would kill you without a second thought. That's why I hid everything. To keep you far away from that world. Her grip on his hands almost hurt. Promise me you won't. Try to fight them, please. Luca looked down at his father's letter, now smeared with a few of his tears. Salvatore had died protecting him, had given everything so he could live free. And indeed, Luca had lived free, oblivious, for 23 years because Elena had willed it so. But now the truth was a drumbeat in his head. Mafia, shot 14 times, Conti. The shadowy curse of his bloodline. He felt anger swelling beneath his grief, a molten core of outrage that such evil had gone unpunished. His father's life stolen, his mother forced into hiding and sorrow, and he had lived ignorant of it all. "I can't promise that," Luca whispered, voice hoarse but resolute. He gently freed his hands from Elena's and stood. "If you were me, could you?" Elena rose too, panic streaking her face. "Luca, no." "Papa wrote to live for what's right," he said, lifting the letter. "How can I live knowing the men who butchered him walk free? Probably still doing their business?" His eyes flashed. They were Salvatore's eyes now, fierce and unyielding. "This Conti, he's out there, Mama," laughing. "Perhaps at how he killed Salvatore Luciano, and no one ever dared retaliate." Elena's hand flew and grasped his arm. "Stop, you don't understand," she started, voice high with desperation. "Then help me understand." Luca roared suddenly, louder than he intended. Elena recoiled, stunned into silence. Luca immediately regretted raising his voice, but the dam had burst. "You understand what it's like to live with this? You always told me he died in an accident, but it was murder. All this time his blood crying out for justice, and I never knew." He paced away a few steps, running his hands through his hair. Emotions warred inside, sorrow for hurting his mother, fury at her deception, and an overwhelming need to do something. A heavy silence hung between them, broken only by Elena's quiet sobbing. Luca forced himself to calm down. He returned to her, wrapping his arms around her shoulders. She trembled against him. "I'm sorry, Mama," he murmured. "I know you wanted to protect me, and I love you for it, but I can't turn away from this now." Elena looked up, eyes red. "Luca, vendetta will not bring him back," she whispered. "It will only risk your life. Then I truly will have nothing." Her words were like a dagger to his heart. He kissed her forehead gently. "You won't lose me," he promised, even as a voice in his head asked how he could guarantee that. "But I have to get answers. At least that." He thought of the address on the letter. Francesco Abate in Palermo. Salvatore's loyal friend, possibly the last living link to the truth, aside from the enemies themselves. If anyone could fill the gaps and guide him, it was this man. "I'll be careful," Luca added, softer. I need to know everything. About Papa, about why he died. I need to hear it from someone who was there." He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs wiping away her tears. "Can you understand that?" Elena searched his face as if memorizing every detail. Finally, with a shuddering breath, she nodded weakly. "I always knew this day might come," she admitted, voice hollow. "You're so much like him." Her fingers curled around his on her cheek. "If you must go, then go. But promise me one thing, you will come back to me, no matter what." "I promise," Luca said, praying he spoke the truth. He pulled her into a tight embrace, and she clung to him fiercely, as though imprinting the feel of him. That night, Luca packed a small duffel bag with essentials. He retrieved the box with the ring mentioned, in the letter, hidden at the back of a drawer. Inside lay a heavy gold ring bearing an ornate family crest, Salvatore's ring. He slipped it into his pocket, not ready to wear it, but feeling its weight like a silent vow. Before dawn, he quietly left their apartment. Elena didn't try to stop him. She stood in the doorway in her robe, eyes shining with love and worry. "Ti voglio bene, figlio mio," she said, voice cracking. "I love you, my son." Luca hugged her one last time. "Ti amo, Mama. I'll be back soon." He turned and walked down the stairs, each step filled with determination. When he glanced back from the street, she was still at the doorway, a lonely figure watching him go with folded arms as if to hold herself together. Luca's journey began on a train heading south, toward Naples, the city where his father drew his last breath. The early morning sun painted the rolling Italian countryside in soft pastel hues as fields and villages blurred by the window. Luca barely saw them. He replayed Elena's words and Salvatore's letter in his mind, forging them into a resolve as solid as iron. Conti. The name rang in his head, with every turn of the train's wheels. He knew of Naples what most outsiders did, a chaotic port city of beauty and danger, home to the Camorra crime syndicate, If Alberto Conti was a Camorra boss who orchestrated his father's murder, he would likely be deeply entrenched and well protected. Luca would be stepping into enemy territory, alone. The thought was daunting. He was no trained investigator or hitman, just a son armed with anger and a name. But he had something else, the element of surprise. To Conti, Salvatore Luciano's line had been extinguished the night of that attack. He would never expect Salvatore's heir to come seeking him after all these years. As the train neared Naples, Luca felt a mix of nerves and grim anticipation. He disembarked at Napoli Centrale Station amid a rush of commuters and tourists. The air here was different, humid, briny, carrying the honking of horns and rapid fire. Italians shouted in arguments and greetings alike. Naples was awake and alive. Luca spent his first hours in the city tracing ghostly footsteps. He visited the narrow street in the Spanish Quarter where, according to his mother's memory, the ambush took place. In the daylight, it looked innocuous. Laundry lines crisscrossing above, scooters zipping by, a small shrine to the Virgin Mary set into a wall. But as Luca stood there, he could almost hear the echoes of gunfire, the scream of a woman, his mother. He knelt and touched the rough cobblestone where he imagined his father fell. A few curious locals glanced at him, but he paid them no mind. Under his breath, he whispered, "I'm here. Papa, I'll make it right." Rising, Luca's eyes burned with resolve. His next stop was the city archives and a dingy internet cafe. He scoured old newspapers and online, records for any mention of Salvatore, Luciano's death. It didn't take long. A Mafia boss gunned down was big news even beyond Italy. He found an article. Gangland hid in Naples. Palermo crime boss Salvatore. Luciano killed in cold blood. Pregnant wife survives. The details were sparse. Police suspected the Camorra, but no arrests were made. A rumor suggested Don Alberto Conti, a rising Camorra leader back then, was behind it, consolidating power by eliminating a Sicilian rival. Luca's jaw tightened reading that. Conti had denied involvement and called it unfortunate violence between criminal elements. Of course, nothing came of any investigations. Omerta. The code of silence ensured that. Luca clicked on another result. A more recent article. Conti was now one of Naples's most influential figures, a reputed mafia kingpin turned businessman with hands in construction, shipping, and politics. There was even a photo of him at a charity gala, a silver-haired man with a wolfish smile, a tasteful suit draping a still powerful frame. He looked every bit the respectable benefactor, but his eyes, predatory. Luca felt a chill. This man commanded others to murder, without flinching, including a friend, and their pregnant wife. As Luca left the cafe, dusk was falling. The city shifted into its evening rhythm. Streetlights blinked on, casting long shadows in graffiti-tagged alleys. Somewhere in this sprawling metropolis, Don Alberto Conti was likely dining in luxury, oblivious that the son of Salvatore Luciano had come to stake his reckoning. Luca had no delusions of simply walking up to Conti. He needed information, leverage, perhaps even help. He thought of the name on the letter again. Francesco Abate in Palermo. That was a lead, but first, Luca wanted to verify something here in Naples. Was there any whisper of an inside betrayal in Luciano's murder? His mother may have shielded him from it, but he sensed a deeper story. If anyone in Naples knew, it would be people in Conti's circle or those on the streets who heard whispers. It was dangerous to ask directly, but Luca was fueled by bold desperation. He decided to start low. That night, Luca visited a seedy bar in Forcella, a quarter known to be Camorra turf. The bar reeked of cigarettes and spilled Peroni beer. Hardened men huddled at tables playing cards, their wary eyes flicking over strangers. Luca, pretending confidence he didn't fully feel, took a seat at the bar and ordered a whiskey. Listening quietly, he caught snippets of conversation, mostly football and local gossip. Eventually he leaned toward the barman, a grizzled man wiping a glass, and in a low voice said, "I'm looking for some information. Perhaps you can help." He slid a €50 note across the counter. The barman raised an eyebrow, slipped the bill away. "Depends on the information." Luca wetted his lips. This had to be played carefully. "I'm trying to track down someone who used to work for Don Conti," he lied smoothly. "An old debt. Heard he might be around here." "Many work for Don Conti," the barman said carefully. The entire bar had grown a tad quieter at the mention of Conti's name. This one would be older now, Luca said. He recalled one name from the news, archives, a triggerman who was rumored to be part of the hit but vanished soon after. Name of Riccardo Romano. It was a shot in the dark. But Luca saw recognition flare in the barman's eyes. Riccardo... The barman's gaze hardened subtly. And who are you to be looking for him? Luca forced a casual shrug. Just settling a family matter. Heard he might have been involved in some business in 2001 with a Sicilian. If he is, I want to thank him personally. The implied menace in his tone made his intent clear. The barman glanced around, then leaned in. I haven't seen Riccardo in years. Few have. But if he's alive, he'll be in the Quartieri Spagnoli. He nodded toward the west. Ask at the garage on Via San Matteo. They'd know. Heart thudding, Luca slid another bill over. Grazie. That very night, under the faint orange glow of street lamps, Luca navigated the warren of the Spanish quarters. Narrow lanes, draped with laundry and echoing with voices and TV sounds from open windows. He found the garage, a shabby auto shop with its gate half closed. Inside, the smell of motor oil was strong. A radio played Neapolitan pop softly. Luca stepped in, palms sweaty. Buonasera, he called. A lanky man in grease-stained coveralls emerged from under a lifted Fiat, eyeing Luca. Shop's closed. I'm looking for Riccardo Romano, Luca announced, standing firm. They said I might find him here. At the mention of the name, the mechanic's expression turned stony. Never heard of him, he said flatly. But his eyes darted to a back door unconsciously. Luca caught the glance. His blood surged. Without warning, he pushed forward past the mechanic. The man cursed and grabbed at him. But Luca shoved him aside with a strength that surprised them both. Luca barreled through the back door into a dim storage room that reeked of tires and fuel. A figure was already fleeing out the back. A man in his late 40s, perhaps, with a shock of graying hair. Stop! Luca shouted, chasing after him into a dead-end alley behind the garage. Realizing there was no escape, the man, Riccardo, spun around. In the gloom, Luca saw the glint of a blade in his hand. The man's eyes were wild and cornered. Who are you? What do you want? He spat, brandishing the knife. Luca raised his hand slowly, circling warily. I just want to talk. If you're Riccardo, then you were there the night Salvatore Luciano was killed. Luca's voice echoed off the close walls. I want to know the truth. The man's face went slack with shock at those names. In that moment, Luca lunged. He knocked aside the older man's knife arm and slammed him against the brick wall. The knife clattered to the ground. Riccardo, for Luca was sure it was him, struggled, but Luca pinned him with an arm to his throat. The fury and adrenaline lent Luca strength beyond his lean build. Tell me what happened that night, Luca growled, tightening his forearm. Who ordered it? Who betrayed my father? The man's eyes bulged. Your father? He choked. He clawed at Luca's arm. I'll tell you, just... All right. Luca eased the pressure slightly. Riccardo sucked in air, coughing. In the faint light, Luca could see sweat beading on the man's brow. He could also see something else. Terror. And relief. As if Riccardo had waited years for a chance to speak of his ghosts. It was Conti, Riccardo rasped. Conti gave the order. Him and those Sicilians who turned on Luciano. Luca's stomach clenched. Those Sicilians? You mean someone from my father's side helped Conti? Riccardo nodded jerkily. One of his own. A friend. Someone high up. We were just foot soldiers following orders. I didn't even know who Luciano was until that night. His gaze darted around. Paranoid. Conti's men and the traitor set the trap. We ambushed them after... They paid me off and told me to disappear. If I wanted to keep breathing. He swallowed hard. I've been hiding ever since. They killed most of the others who knew too much. Luca's heart thundered. He struggled to keep his voice steady. Name the traitor, Riccardo cringed. I only heard a name once. Not sure if it's right. Say it, Luca demanded, lifting him slightly and slamming him back for emphasis. Now. Riccardo squeezed his eyes shut as if expecting a fatal blow for speaking. Carlo, he whispered. I heard the name Carlo. It felt as if the ground tilted beneath. Luca, Carlo. He had suspected it deep down, from Salvatore's shocked whisper to the guilt in his mother's eyes. Now here was confirmation from a stranger's lips. A name to the betrayal. Luca's hands trembled with rage. The friend his father had trusted like a brother had orchestrated his murder. Alberto Conti might have ordered it. But Carlo, Likely Carlo Bernardi, his father's underboss, had delivered the fatal treachery. It was almost too monstrous to fathom. The surge of wrath made Luca careless. His grip loosened a fraction as he processed the revelation. Riccardo seized the moment. He wrenched free of Luca's hold with surprising agility and bolted down the alley, vaulting over a stack of crates. "Hey!" Luca shouted, snapping back to attention. He gave chase, but Riccardo had the advantage of knowing the back streets. Within seconds, he vanished around a bend into the night maze of Naples. Luca skidded to a halt, cursing. Riccardo was gone, but his words remained, hanging in the heavy air. Carlo. The final puzzle piece slid into place. The betrayal within the Luciano family had enabled Conti's ambush. Perhaps it was the only reason they succeeded. It made sense. Salvatore would have been too cautious unless lulled by trust. Luca leaned on the alley wall, catching his breath, trying to calm the maelstrom inside. He had come to Naples to find his father's killer and learned he had two. One in Naples, one in Sicily. And the one in Sicily was bound to be even more personal and painful to confront. A distant roll of thunder echoed over the bay. The air was thick. Luca hadn't even noticed the gathering clouds. A sudden summer downpour began, heavy droplets pelting the cobblestones. In the cool wash of rain, Luca felt a strange clarity. His journey was no longer just about retribution on a distant enemy. It was about setting right a betrayal at the heart of his family. He knew his next step now, Palermo. He would meet Francesco Abate, as the letter instructed. Francesco would confirm everything. Perhaps he already knew of Carlo's treachery. Maybe that's why he stayed distant. To protect Elena and Luca until the time was right. Regardless, Francesco could help him confront Carlo Bernardi, the man who had feigned brotherhood with Salvatore, and then delivered him to his death. Luca trudged out of the alley, rain plastering his hair to his skull, washing away the grime of the fight. In the distance, he could see the hazy glow of the port. Lightning flashed over Mount Vesuvius in the dark. This city had given him answers and nearly gotten him killed or worse in the process. He had to move quickly now. Conti's people might learn someone was asking questions, and Riccardo, if caught by them, wouldn't last long. 2 hours later, a drenched and weary Luca sat on an overnight bus heading for Sicily. For Palermo, his father's birthplace, and Carlo's domain. The bus was nearly empty at this late hour. Luca slumped in the back row, hoodie drawn up to cover his face, his mind churning with plans and emotions. He found himself fingering the ring in his pocket. Under the dim reading light, he pulled it out and slipped it onto his finger. It was a touch too large, having been made for Salvatore's hand. But Luca felt a jolt as the cool metal pressed against his skin. The family crest, a rampant lion, gleamed faintly. It felt like an inheritance of strength and vengeance. Luca clenched his fist, the ring's weight solid and reassuring. "I am coming for you, Conti and Carlo," he whispered into the humming darkness of the bus. "For Papa, for Mama, for me." The vow settled into his bones with iron finality. He gazed out the window as the bus boarded the ferry that would carry them across the strait to Sicily. Far over the Black Sea, another crack of lightning illuminated the clouds. It felt like the sky itself was angry, a tempest brewing, that would not be quelled until justice was done. Palermo, Sicily, 2 days later. The city of his father's youth greeted Luca with a blaze of summer. Sunlight and the briny scent of the Tyrrhenian Sea. Palermo was vibrant chaos. Mount Pellegrino looming in the distance, palms lining boulevards, endless stands selling panelli and arancini, and a cacophony of car horns and animated chatter in Sicilian dialect. But Luca felt little of the tourists' wonder. As he stepped off the bus, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, he was acutely aware that this was Carlo Bernardi's stronghold. If Conti was a king in Naples, Carlo was an emperor here, ruling what remained of the Luciano family's operations, now his operations, and with an iron fist. And Luca was a lone interloper with no backup, walking straight into the lion's den. Yet a spark of hope burned within. Francesco Abate. That name and address in his father's letter had stayed with him through the sleepless journey. Francesco had been Salvatore's consigliere, if Luca recalled the term correctly. An advisor, perhaps like an uncle figure. If he still lived and was loyal, he would aid Salvatore's son. Luca navigated twisting streets to the address, a modest stucco house on the outskirts of the city, with bougainvillea creeping along the wall. He approached the gate, heart pounding, and pressed the buzzer. Long moments passed. Just as he was about to press again, a gravelly voice crackled through the speaker in Italian. "Who is it?" "Mi chiamo Luca. Luca Rossi," he replied, using the surname he grew up with. Then he added deliberately, "I'm the son of Salvatore Luciano. I need to speak with Francesco Abate." A stunned silence. Then the gate lock buzzed open. Luca entered a small courtyard, and the front door opened an inch, revealing a cautious elderly eye peering out. Chains rattled, then the door swung wide. Francesco Abate had aged, but he was still imposing, tall and gaunt, with silver hair combed back from a lined, stern face. He looked at Luca as if seeing a ghost. "Madonna Santa," he breathed. "You have Salvo's eyes." The mention of his father's nickname sent a pang through Luca. He gave a tentative smile. "And I see why he trusted you, sir." Francesco ushered him in quickly, glancing outside before shutting the door and bolting it. "Come in, my boy. Come in." His voice betrayed both joy and fear. They settled in a small living room smelling of old books and pipe tobacco. Francesco's hand trembled as he poured Luca a glass of water. "Elena kept you well hidden," he said with a sad smile. "I never saw you after you were born, only heard whispers that you both survived and went to ground. I didn't even know if that letter reached you." "I found it," Luca nodded. "Mama had it all along." Francesco sat across from him, leaning forward on his cane. "Then you know what happened to your father. At least the broad strokes." "I know Conti orchestrated it. I know. Carlo betrayed him." Luca's lips curled bitterly on the name. "I heard it confirmed by one of Conti's men in Naples." He quickly recounted his encounter with Riccardo, and the information gleaned. Francesco closed his eyes as if in pain. "Carlo Bernardi," he said softly, "was like a brother to Salvo. We all trusted him. I suspected for years, but never had proof. After the funeral, Carlo took control of what remained of the family. He told everyone Conti alone was responsible and that he'd seek vengeance. But instead he made peace with Conti and divided territories. That snake prospered while we buried Salvatore." Francesco's voice shook with quiet rage. Luca felt a surge of camaraderie with the old man's anger. "He lives like a king now, doesn't he?" Francesco nodded, expression grim. "Capo dei capi in Palermo, practically. Untouchable." "Or so he thinks." He reached out and grasped Luca's shoulder. "Your father would never want you in harm's way. But you're here, and I see his resolve in you. You mean to settle this, don't you?" Luca met Francesco's gaze evenly. "I do. It's more than vengeance now, it's justice. Carlo and Conti, they've poisoned this world long enough." A faint smile touched the old consigliere's lips, spoken like Salvatore. He had begun to talk of justice, too, in his final days, trying to steer the family to more honorable ways. That's partly why Carlo turned on him. Salvo's conscience was bad for business. Francesco gestured to a cabinet. "Open that, will you?" Luca did, finding inside a hidden compartment that revealed a small arsenal, a couple of handguns, boxes of ammunition, even a grenade or two. He raised his eyebrows at Francesco. The old man chuckled dryly. "I've kept some insurance over the years. After what happened, one learns to be prepared." He stood slowly. "I'm with you. Luca, I've waited long for this." Reckoning, warmth, and gratitude flooded Luca. He hadn't realized how desperately he'd needed an ally until now. "Grazie, zio," he said, calling him uncle instinctively. The older man's eyes moistened at the term. They spent the next hours hatching a plan. Francesco filled Luca in on Carlo's routines and residence. The betrayer had made his home in a countryside villa outside Palermo, fortified and guarded. However, tomorrow night Carlo would be somewhat exposed. He was hosting a private party at an upscale Palermo hotel, ostensibly a charity benefit, but really a gathering of Mafia elites and politicians, showing off his power. Francesco had an old contact among the hotel staff who could slip them in as part of the service crew. It was risky, but the benefit of striking at the party was that Carlo would be off his fortress turf, and likely somewhat off guard amid friends and celebration. The downside, he'd still have bodyguards and dozens of witnesses, including innocent staff. A direct shootout in a ballroom could get messy fast. Luca considered another angle. What if we could lure Carlo away during the event? Somewhere isolated? Francesco stroked his chin. Difficult, but maybe if he got word of something urgent or enticing. His eyes suddenly lit with a cunning glint. Carlo never found Elena and you after that night. He looked quietly for a time. Unfinished business. You see, worried you might resurface. If he were to get new information that Elena Luciano was alive in, say Palermo and seeking a secret meet, he'd bite. He'd want to eliminate that loose end quietly. Luca's blood went cold at using his mother as bait, even in a ruse, but it made sense. Carlo's guilty conscience, what little he had, would leap at a chance to snuff out Elena if he thought she re-emerged. He'd slip out of the party for that, Luca said slowly. Likely with minimal guards to keep it hush-hush. Francesco nodded, already reaching for his telephone. I can have someone leak a tip to one of Carlo's men tomorrow evening. Someone they trust? The message will be that Elena Luciano was spotted at a certain old church on the outskirts, asking for a meeting with Carlo, claiming she has evidence to trade for her safety. Carlo will not ignore that. Luca felt a surge of apprehension imagining his mother's name crossing Carlo's ears after so long, but Elena was safe in Rome. This was just a lure. Where would we set the trap? Francesco answered without hesitation. La Chiesa di San Michele. It's a small abandoned chapel outside the city. No prying eyes. Carlo knows it as a discreet spot for clandestine meetings. If he's intrigued, he'll go there. A plan gelled. Lure Carlo to the chapel under false pretenses. Ambush him there away from his army. Luca and Francesco, perhaps with a couple of Francesco's old loyalists he could quietly recruit, would confront him. Carlo would finally face judgment. What about Conti? Luca asked quietly. He's in Naples. But he's as much a target. Francesco frowned. Conti will hear of whatever happens here, and he'll fortify himself. Reaching him might require a war between families, but he patted Luca's shoulder. One devil at a time, my boy. Carlo first. Conti can come next if fate allows. Luca accepted that with a curt nod. In truth, his hatred for Conti was now eclipsed by his fury at Carlo's betrayal. If he had to choose one, it would be Carlo. They agreed on the details. Francesco's contact would leak the tip late the next day. At the height of Carlo's party, Luca would go to the chapel early to position himself. Francesco insisted on joining. But given his age and limp, they decided he would remain hidden outside as backup, maybe with one ally to cut off Carlo's escape route. As they finalized the plan, Francesco suddenly looked at Luca intently. There is one more thing. He hobbled to a chest and pulled out a small tape recorder. An old device, its black plastic casing scuffed. Salvo gave this to me a week before he died. It's a recording of a conversation between him and Carlo. Francesco pressed play. In the quiet room, Luca heard his father's voice crackle through, warm and familiar, speaking of hopes for the family's future, wanting to get out of drug trade. And another voice. Carlo's, agreeing smoothly but with false warmth. The recording was short, but toward the end, one line stood out. Salvatore said, I trust you with my life, Carlo. And Carlo responded after a pause. Always. My friend. Luca's throat tightened with disgust. That lying tone, you could hear it if you knew to listen. I kept it as a painful souvenir. Francesco sighed, stopping the tape. But perhaps it will help steel your resolve. Luca didn't need help with that, but having his father's voice in his ears on the eve of battle was strangely fortifying. Grazie. That night, Luca slept in Francesco's guest room. The first real sleep in days, albeit haunted by dreams of flickering gunfire and chasing shadows. He woke at dawn to find a note from Francesco. He'd gone to arrange the message and gather what few resources he had. Be ready by dusk, it read. Luca spent the day mentally preparing. He field-stripped and checked the pistol. Francesco had given him an old but well-maintained Beretta. He loaded spare magazines, tucked one of the grenades into his bag just in case, praying he wouldn't need such extremes. And he thought of his mother. He dared not call her, not yet. She likely was frantic back in Rome. But if he spoke to her now, her pleas might weaken his focus. He wrote a letter instead, promising he would return, and left it with Francesco's things for later delivery if needed. By early evening, clouds gathered again over Palermo, as if nature held its breath with them. Francesco returned with a subtle smile. It's done. The bait will be cast at 9 o'clock. Sharp. They drove in a nondescript car to the rendezvous early, parking off a dirt road. The Chiesa di San Michele stood lonely amid overgrown cypress trees. Its stone facade was crumbling, the wooden door slightly ajar and squeaking in the breeze. Inside, the church was dark, musty, long abandoned, pews eaten by rot, moonlight filtering through a collapsed section of roof. Luca positioned himself in a shadow behind what had once been the altar, now just rubble and a few surviving statues of saints. He felt a strange calm descend, like the moment of eye in a storm. In the distance, down the hill, faint lights of Palermo twinkled, oblivious to the drama about to unfold in this forgotten place. Francesco and a single associate, a burly, quiet man named Tommaso, who had served Salvatore long ago, hid near the entrance outside, ready to cut off retreat. They had a getaway car hidden behind the grove too, if needed. At just past 9, a black Maserati pulled up the dirt path, headlights off. Luca tensed, peering through a crack in the wall. 3 silhouettes emerged. One obviously Carlo, tall, portly, confidently striding forward in a tuxedo that seemed incongruous in these ruins. Flanking him were 2 bodyguards in dark suits, hands inside jackets. So Carlo hadn't come entirely alone, but he kept the detail light, likely to avoid drawing attention at his party. They entered the church slowly. Carlo barked an order to one guard. "Check the back." The man nodded and peeled off down a side aisle. The other remained at Carlo's side as they stepped toward the center. Luca could hear Carlo's breath, see his outline about 15 feet away. Carlo's gun was drawn. He wasn't taking chances. In the dim blue light, his silver hair gave him an almost spectral look. "Elena," Carlo called out softly, mockingly. "I'm here. Come out, wherever you are." His voice echoed off the stone. Luca's heart pounded. He waited until the guard who went to check the back was near his hiding spot. In a swift motion, Luca stepped from behind a toppled column and, before the guard could shout, whipped the butt of his pistol across the man's temple. The guard crumpled with a grunt. The noise alerted Carlo and the other thug. "Chicha!" "Who's there?" Carlo barked, wheeling toward the sound, gun arm extended. Luca stepped into the dim light, gun aimed steadily at Carlo. "Looking for someone, Carlo?" he asked, voice echoing. Carlo squinted, not recognizing the young man immediately. "Who the hell—" "I'm Luca," he announced, taking a few measured steps closer. A flash of lightning lit up the broken roof above, illuminating Luca's face. Luca Luciano, son of Salvatore and Elena. Carlo's mouth fell open in genuine shock. He looked as if he were seeing a ghost, which, in a sense, he was. "Impossible," he whispered. His gun hand trembled ever so slightly. We were told the baby died that night." "You were told—" "Wrong!" Luca's voice hardened. "I lived. My mother lived. You failed, Carlo." Carlo's face contorted with an amalgam of disbelief, fear, and something like twisted delight. "Well, figlio di Salvatore," he said, recovering slightly, though sweat glistened on his brow. "You certainly have your father's eyes. And his gall, confronting me like this." The remaining bodyguard swung his pistol toward Luca. "Finger on the trigger. Drop it." Luca yelled at him, shifting aim for an instant to the henchman. Carlo suddenly seized that moment. He dove to the side, behind a pillar, firing 2 shots wildly as he moved. Crack, crack! The bullets whizzed past Luca, one sparking off stone near his head. The bodyguard also opened fire, forcing Luca to duck and roll behind a broken pew. Gunshots thundered in the confined space. Plaster dust rained down. Luca returned fire at the guard. 1, 2 shots. The first hit the thug's shoulder. He cried out and stumbled. Luca's second shot hit the man square in the chest. With a wheeze, the guard collapsed to the floor, motionless. Silence fell, broken only by the distant rumble of thunder and Carlo's ragged breathing behind his pillar. Luca stayed crouched, adrenaline hammering. He listened keenly. He had 1 guard unconscious, 1 likely dead. That left Carlo, cornered but armed and dangerous. "Stai fermo, ragazzo," Carlo called out, voice dripping with venom. "Stay where you are, boy." Luca could hear him edging behind the pillar, steps scuffing debris. "So, you came for revenge, eh? Following Daddy's footsteps into a world of hurt." Luca felt a surge of anger at the taunt. "I'm nothing like you, Carlo," he shouted back. "You callously murdered a man who trusted you, who would have died for you. How do you justify that? Did you even lose a wink of sleep?" A harsh laugh echoed. "Justification? This is the life, ragazzo. Your father forgot that." He grew soft. Love and dreams made him weak. "I did what needed to be done." Carlo paused, then added coldly, "Don't worry. I'll send you to meet him shortly. Family reunion, eh? Luca's grip tightened on his pistol. He peeked around the pew, quickly withdrawing as a bullet shattered the wood near his face. Carlo was still quick on the trigger. Suddenly, a new voice called from the entrance. Carlo! Drop your weapon. It's over. Francesco. He and Tommaso had entered behind Carlo, guns aimed at the Mafia boss. Carlo whipped around, shocked to find himself flanked. Tommaso stepped forward from the doorway gloom. Carlo snarled and fired at him, but age and treachery hadn't dulled Tommaso's reflexes. He sidestepped and shot back, the bullet grazing Carlo's shooting arm. Carlo yelped, his gun clattering from his hand to the stone floor. Before Carlo could scramble for it, Luca was on him. In 2 strides, he closed the distance and kicked the handgun far across the floor. Carlo stumbled back, clutching his bleeding arm, and crashed against the altar steps, falling onto his back. Unarmed, wounded, he looked up in terror as Luca loomed over him, barrel trained between Carlo's eyes. Francesco hurried in, pistol leveled, while Tommaso kept watch on the unconscious guard. Rain began to pour outside, a curtain of water audible just beyond the church walls. Carlo's chest heaved, yet even pinned like a rat, he managed a twisted grin. So, you have me. Now what, boy? Going to kill me in cold blood? He spat to the side. That won't bring him back. Luca's finger twitched on the trigger. How easy it would be to end him right now. A single bullet. Justice, vengeance, both would be served. His hand shook with the desire for it. Memories of his father's final moments flooded him. 14 bullets ripping into Salvatore, his mother's screams. Luca's vision blurred red. Francesco stepped closer. Luca, he warned softly, seeing the young man tremble on the edge. He's not worth your soul. Remember who you are. Carlo laughed hoarsely at that. Listen to the old man, Luca. You're not a killer, are you? Unlike your friend Francesco here. Oh, I remember you. Traditore. He sneered at a bait. Switching sides now, eh? Francesco's eyes flashed. I was loyal to Salvatore. Unlike you, Snake. Carlo wiped some blood from his temple, looking between them all. Surprisingly, he began to chuckle, a bitter, mad sound. If you're going to do it, he taunted Luca. But know this, kill me, and you'll have 100 devils coming after you by sunrise. My men, Conti, all of them. You and your mother will wish you died tonight. Luca's jaw clenched. He realized he didn't care. They can come, he growled. I'll send them all to hell to join you. He pressed the gun, muzzle to Carlo's forehead. Lightning flashed, illuminating the tableau. An avenging sun, and the cowering traitor who betrayed his family. Carlo's bravado flickered. Sweat poured down his face. And for what, Carlo? Luca hissed through his teeth. Why did you do it? My father would have given you anything. You were practically an uncle to me, to a child unborn. Why? For a moment, something like regret shadowed Carlo's eyes, but then his lip curled. Because your father forgot what it meant to be ruthless. He talked of going straight, of peace. Peace doesn't fill coffers or command fear. He would have led us to ruin. I did what a real leader would do. His voice cracked, some inner rationalization failing. And maybe I wanted what he had. The power, the respect, even Elena's loyalty. His gaze flickered, revealing a kernel of jealousy and twisted love. She never looked at anyone but him. Luca's stomach churned with disgust. So it was envy and ambition, petty poisonous sins, that had destroyed his family. Carlo must have seen the loathing in Luca's expression, because his tone turned cajoling. You understand, don't you? You have that fire too, I can see it. We are not so different, you and I. At that, Luca could not hold back. He swung his free hand and punched Carlo across the jaw with every ounce of strength. Carlo's head snapped to the side, blood spraying from a split lip. I am nothing like you, Luca snarled. I don't murder friends or women or unborn children. Carlo spat blood. One of his teeth knocked loose. His composure finally cracked. Fear, unadulterated, shone in his eyes. He knew he wasn't leaving this place alive unless he found some leverage. Some way out. Desperate, he began to blubber. Luca, think of your mother. She wouldn't want you to do this. She'd want mercy, yes? Carlo attempted a pathetic smile with bloody teeth. Be the better man, let the law or fate handle me. If you kill me in cold blood, you're just a criminal, like me. Luca's mind flashed to his mother's gentle face, her pleas for him to stay safe, to not pursue this dark path. He faltered. Gun wavering slightly. Could Carlo be right? Would doing this make him no better? Francesco interjected, voice cold. Carlo, after all the lives you've destroyed, you dare speak of the law or mercy? He looked at Luca. He's stalling. Luca. We can't linger. Conti will wonder why he left the party. Indeed. Time was running against them. Tommaso shifted nervously by the door. Carlo, eyes darting, seized upon Luca's hesitation. In a flash of insane boldness, he lunged upward, trying to grab Luca's gun with his good hand. No! Luca shouted, wrestling with him. Carlo's fingers scrabbled at the barrel, forcing it aside a few inches, spoiling Luca's aim. They struggled fiercely, Luca's knee driving into Carlo's gut to pin him. Suddenly, bang! A gunshot thundered between them. Luca jerked back, expecting pain, but felt none. Carlo gasped sharply, eyes bulging. Behind Carlo, Francesco stood, arm outstretched, smoke wafting from the muzzle of his pistol. He had fired, the bullet finding its mark in Carlo's torso as the man grappled with Luca. Carlo made a wet, choking sound. He staggered, looking down at the blood rapidly staining his pristine white dress shirt. Ah, he gurgled, one hand pawing at the wound uselessly. Luca, breathing hard, stood over him again, gun still in hand but not fired. Carlo sank to his knees, then collapsed sideways onto the cold stone floor. He coughed weakly, crimson bubbles foaming on his lips. Francesco approached, face impassive. He forced my hand, the old man said softly. Luca nodded numbly. Together they watched Carlo Bernardi, betrayer, murderer, sputter out his last breaths. His eyes, filled with pain and terror, flickered between Luca and Francesco. Perhaps he sought pity, or perhaps curses, but whatever words he wished to utter drowned in a wet rattle. In moments, the light in Carlo's eyes dimmed. With a final shudder, he went still, blood pooling beneath him in a dark halo. It was over. Carlo was dead. Luca felt an unexpected sting of tears. Not grief for Carlo, but a release of long-held tension. A sorrow for what could have been. A friend who should have remained loyal. An alternate past where his father lived. All that died here too. Francesco placed a steadying hand on Luca's shoulder. He's gone. Luca, Salvatore is avenged. Tommaso checked Carlo's pulse, then nodded grimly. Fatto. It's done. Thunder rumbled again, the storm intensifying outside. Luca realized he was shaking. From adrenaline, from emotional overload. He forced himself to breathe slowly. We have to go, he managed. Conti would indeed come after them with fury once news reached him. They couldn't stay in Sicily or anywhere openly. Francesco quickly wiped their presence as best he could, using a cloth to retrieve. Their shell casings pocketing them. He glanced at the unconscious guard and the one Luca shot. Leave them. They'll tell the tale to Conti. Luca nodded. He took one last look at Carlo's corpse. The man's face had settled into a slack emptiness, eyes staring at nothing. No triumph or gloating now, just another dead criminal in a lonely church. Impulsively, Luca reached into his pocket and pulled out Salvatore's ring. He knelt and shoved it onto one of Carlo's fingers, which were already growing cold. It was a tight fit on the traitor's thick digit. You don't deserve this, Luca whispered to the dead man, voice trembling. But I want them to know who did this to you. The Luciano crest on the ring would be an unmistakable signature to Conti or any Mafia who found Carlo's body. A message that the Luciano line had returned from the grave for revenge. Francesco gave a solemn nod of understanding. Together, the three avengers slipped out into the raging storm. Rain plastered them within seconds as they dashed to the car. The city lights in the distance were hazy through the downpour, but Luca did not look back at them. He didn't feel triumph or joy, only a grim satisfaction tempered by sorrow, and a deep longing to see his mother. They drove off into the night, leaving the traitor and the ghosts behind. 2 weeks later, Rome. Dawn broke with watercolor pastels over the Tiber River. On a quiet bench in the Villa Borghese gardens, Luca sat with Elena by his side, their hands intertwined. She hadn't let go of him since he returned to her, and Luca didn't mind one bit. He had come back to Rome under the cover of darkness days earlier, escorted by Francesco. Conti's network was hunting for a mysterious Luciano's son, but thanks to chaos within the Camorra after Conti's sudden heart attack, Tommaso's doing before they parted ways, and disarray in Palermo's underworld after Carlo's demise, Luca and Francesco managed to slip through the cracks. For now they were safe. Elena listened quietly as Luca, voice low and steady, recounted everything to her. He held nothing back this time. Not the letter, not the fights, not the moment he nearly became a killer, and Francesco pulled the trigger instead. She deserved the truth, and he was done keeping her in the dark to protect her. They would face life and its dangers together from now on. Tears silently coursed down Elena's cheeks as she heard of Carlo's betrayal, confirmed, and of her husband's final moments honored by their son. When Luca's tale was done, she turned to him and gently cradled his face between her palms. Her eyes searched his, brimming with love and concern. "You look so much like him," she whispered. "And you have his heart, Luca. He would be so proud." Her voice broke on the last words. Luca finally allowed himself to cry then, closing his eyes as Elena drew him into her embrace. Mother and son held each other as the sun rose, shedding years of pain with each tear. After a while, Elena spoke, soft but firm. "We will likely have to leave here, at least for a time. If Conti still lives, he will seek you." Luca nodded. "Francesco agrees. We have resources to disappear for a while." He glanced at her apologetically. "I'm sorry, Mama. I never wanted to uproot your life." Elena gave a watery laugh and stroked his hair. "Oh, my dear boy, my life is you. A new city, a new name, it doesn't matter as long as we're together." She looked off toward the horizon, a steely glint in her eyes. "I hid once out of fear. This time, if we hide, it's only to gather strength. They will not haunt our steps forever." Luca realized with admiration that Elena, too, had Salvatore's resolve when it came to protecting family. Perhaps someday they could truly stop running. Perhaps Conti might fall or lose interest. Or perhaps Luca would finish it by confronting Conti directly if fate led him there. But that was for another day. Francesco was arranging safe passage for them abroad. Should they choose, maybe Spain or South America, the old consigliere had insisted on continuing to help, feeling duty-bound to Salvatore's legacy. Luca was grateful. He had gained not only vengeance but also a surrogate uncle. But those were decisions for tomorrow. Here and now, Luca felt an overwhelming sense of relief and bittersweet peace. The shadow of unanswered questions and unfulfilled justice was lifted. In its place was grief, yes, for a father lost, for innocence lost, yet also love, bright and unbreakable between mother and son. Elena cupped his cheek and made him meet her gaze. "Promise me one more thing, Luca." "Anything," he replied sincerely. "Promise me you'll live," she said. "Truly live. Not for revenge or hiding, but for you. Find happiness, fall in love, have a family, all the things your father wanted for you. We've both shed enough tears. It's time to live." Luca felt a warmth blooming in his chest like the sunrise. He remembered his father's letter. "Live for what's right. I gave my life to protect you. Live, my son." He smiled, a real hopeful smile, and nodded. "I promise, Mama." Elena smiled back through her tears, and they rose from the bench, walking home as the city stirred awake. The storm of violence had passed. Ahead lay an uncertain road, but they would walk it together, hearts unburdened by secrets at last. As they exited the gardens, Luca glanced at a nearby newsstand. The headline of a paper caught his eye. "Mysterious Death's Rock. Mafia Circles. Power Vacuum in Palermo and Naples." Subheadings mentioned. "Alberto Conti's reported fatal stroke and Carlo Bernardi's assassination with an unknown motive." Luca felt Elena squeeze his hand, guiding him gently onward. "Don't look back," she murmured. He obeyed, turning his back on the newspapers and all they signified. Instead, he looked at his mother's face, at the lightness that had returned to her eyes despite everything. He felt the future beckoning, unwritten and full of possibility. Luca Luciano had returned and delivered brutal revenge to those who had wronged his family. But more importantly, he had reclaimed the truth of his identity and broken the chains of fear that bound them. In doing so, he found not darkness but the start of healing. As they stepped into the soft sunlight of a new day, Luca knew Salvatore was at peace and watching over them, and he knew that he and Elena would carry on. Come what may, survivors tempered by tragedy, bound by love, moving forward into whatever dawn awaited, free at last.